Hello, this is a quick tutorial on QGIS. This tutorial won't cover all the features of QGIS, nor will it cover where to find GIS data. This is specific to DXF Export from QGIS. So this is going to look at today how to get data outside of QGIS into another format. Like DXF obviously is AutoCAD, which then it can be used in Photoshop or SketchUp or some other program from there. Something that's much more flexible than a shapefile format that is native to GIS. So what I'm going to do is add a data set in order to get started. Right now my window is blank, so you can see that there's nothing in there. So before we can do anything, we actually need to have data to export. So I actually have some available here that I've downloaded. It's the GIS files from the County of Orange. I'm going to select everything. I may not use everything, but I'd like to see it so I can make that decision. Just takes a second to load, make sure that's all in there and everything's good. What I'm going to do is also go up to my layers. I'm going to hide all my layers, and then that way I can just toggle them on and off one by one. So you can see that I have actually the city boundaries for each of the different cities in the county, local streets, railroad lines, school districts, etc. What I'm going to do is, what I'm really interested, I think, is these parcel polygons. And it's going to be a nice background for a series of maps that I'm working on. It has a nice rich texture to it, gives me an idea about the density and just some different things. So what I want to do is definitely be able to use this data. Now, by default, QGIS brings in this color on all of its polygon layers. It just assigns a color randomly, so next time I open this file it may be a different color. In this case, what I'm going to do real quick, it's not imperative that I do this. I'm just going to turn the color off. I do that just graphically so it's a little bit easier to read, especially if there's a layer underneath it that the color might be covering. I want to be able to see that. So in this case I have one layer turned on, and I've actually removed the color fill just so I can see the line work by itself. So everything looks good. I'm ready to go. So there's a couple different ways to export to DXF in order to become a DWG eventually. I'm going to start with the most basic one, which is going up to Project and then DXF Export. So you can see it gives you some different settings here. It gives you a save as, and of course it lists your layers. So if I want to find my parcel polygon layer, make sure that's selected. And then I want to, it's a little bit different for a Mac and a PC. What I'm going to do is browse to a path, save it to my desktop. I'm going to call this Parcels. And I'm going to call it DXF. So a PC will automatically put the DXF, a Mac won't, so you may have trouble exporting if you don't have the DXF on there. Make sure to check that. So you actually put the DXF in there if it doesn't automatically add it for you. In this case, we want to make sure that we have no symbology. So what we don't want is any extra information in the symbology mode, and the scale shouldn't be a factor. So I've got my one layer selected, and I'm going to go ahead and just hit OK. The little watch and my rainbow wheel says that it's thinking, which is good. If it fails, it will put a message in red real quick. It'll say DXF export failed. In this case, the little message came up blue, DXF export completed. What I'm going to do is browse my parcel DXF. Now what it did was it exported all the parcel information, which is why it's a 91.1 megabyte file, which I know from past experience I may have trouble with in CAD. You'll notice when you zoom out, it's all the parcel information for the entire County of Orange. Now in this case I'm really not interested in all of that. That's just going to be a waste of time for me to have to open that up and remove it and export it and all that stuff, when I'm really only interested in this section. Now there's a couple different ways to just get this section. Now we're going to go back and do the same process again, Project, Export, DXF Export. We're going to select the same parcel layer. I'm going to call this Parcels, but I'll just call this Selection, something like that, something that will give me an idea of what I'm, or cropped or something like that, or Dana Point, the city of Dana Point. So Parcel Selection, save. Same thing, everything else the same. Now this one says here, now this has worked for me in the past, but I want to show you just what this feature does and doesn't do. Export features intersecting the current map extent. Now in theory that's exactly what I want. So I'm going to check that box. What it should do, this is your map extent. So everything that shows up on my screen should actually show up in the export. So it's not going to export everything, it's just what we're looking at. That's exactly what I want it to do. So what I'm going to do is hit OK, everything looks good. It thinks for a second, it says completed. Okay, now here's kind of the trick. So now we've got 1.2 megabytes. You can see that that's quite a bit different than the 91.1 megabytes. So I don't even want to open the 91.1 megabytes. I know that may even crash my CAD. I'm going to grab just the 1.2 megabytes. I'm going to go ahead and take a look and see what that looks like. So I'm going to let CAD think about it for a second. Now the parcel layers for all GIS drawings are going to be some of your larger data sets. In fact, for Orange County, the entire data set was 92 megabytes for all those layers that we looked at, and it was actually 76 megabytes for just the parcel layer. So just to kind of keep that in mind is that the parcel layer creates quite a large number of polylines and therefore is quite a large data set. So I'm going to go ahead and hit zoom extent to zoom out. What I have here is a scale issue. This is an issue that I've encountered. If I select this little white dot, it'll actually tell me that I have 8,833 polylines, but I can't actually get in to zoom it. Now there's a scale bust going on, even though the scale shouldn't be relevant for my export. So I'm finding that in this case, even though it shows there's information there, it's not accessible. I can't zoom window it, and I can't zoom extent it. Nor can I copy and paste it in a new drawing. So unfortunately, even though it shows there's data there, I can't do anything with it. So there's a workaround to it that I found, as there's always more than one way to do something. Now in this case, what you can actually do, instead of going project DXF Export, and actually I guess before I show you this step, is that sometimes another problem with the DXF export is sometimes it actually exports a blank drawing. So in this case it shows that there's data there, but I'm not able to see it. Oftentimes what you'll see is during the DXF export is that it shows a 16 kilobyte file when something should be much larger. That tells you that the drawing is empty. So 16 kilobytes, it just means that it's an empty CAD file. So that's another issue that I found as a bug with the DXF export. I haven't solved the problem, I don't know why. So I found a workaround, which is right-clicking on the layer that you want, going down to Save As. So this is a different way to do it. The nice thing about this is that it gives you multiple options. If I actually wanted to save it as a shapefile, and it already is a shapefile, but let's say I was to draw my own custom map, I can now export it as a shapefile. In this case, I want to select the AutoCAD DXF. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to browse. I'm going to call this Parcels, and I'm going to call this in this case, I'm going to just write Save As, just so I remember what I'm doing here, the differences between the different files. And this one says, do I want to save? Do I want the save file to come back to my map? No, in this case, I actually just want to get it out of the map, so I'm really not worried about adding it back in again. In this case, it asks me, what extents do I want? It gives me a couple different options. I can either do the layer extent, which is going to be all the parcels, and I already know I'm able to do that. It's just it's too large of a file. So in this case, I want to do the map view extent. So if I click that, now pay attention to the coordinates. What it does is you'll see that those switched, and those became a much smaller number. So what I'm going to do is just hit OK here. It's going to ask me about a filter, which I'm just going to go with the default setting. We didn't this time. Saving done. Export has been completed. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at that file. Parcel save as 5.6 megabytes. Okay, so there's some data there. That's good. I'm going to see what this looks like, what this does. First thing I'm going to do is zoom, enter, zoom extents. Now, this is something that I've seen is the default settings in QGIS is to save polygon layers as hatches. So I'm not actually exporting polylines, I'm exporting polygons, and therefore it gives us these hatches. Now I could run a command in CAD that says generate hatch boundary. Then I've got to actually generate the hatch boundary and then delete the hatch. So what I would like to do is find a way to export DXF from QGIS, not as hatches, but as polylines. I'm going to close that. Again, another file that's not usable for me, unfortunately. So we're 0 for 2. I'm going to try again another way. There's a setting up here called Vector and Geometry Tools. And Geometry Tools allows you to, if you scroll down here, it says polygons to lines. Well, polygons is what we have here. and polygons is also what generates that hatch boundary. So if I can convert my polygons to lines, then that should solve that problem. So I'm going to go ahead and click polygons to lines. It's going to ask me which layer would I like to convert. I'm going to scroll down to the parcel polygon layer. Now it, by default, wants to export a shapefile, which we're just going to ignore. We'll go ahead and browse to the desktop, and we're just going to call this, parcels. It doesn't matter. We're not going to use the shapefiles in this case. We're just doing this because you can see here the little button, Add Result to Canvas. We actually want to bring in a new layer to our canvas, and it's going to be a non-polygon layer. In this case, it's going to be a line layer. I'm going to go ahead and hit, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name of that to Parcels Lines, and that just reminds me that I'm converting this to lines. And then I'll hit OK. Now, even though I've selected the map extent, well, actually, no, that's the next layer. So what it's doing, unfortunately, in this is converting the entire layer. So what it's not doing is allowing me to convert just the selection. So that in this case, if I'm converting a really large layer with lots of data, like the parcel layer, then even though I'm only interested in this section, in order to convert it to lines, I've got to go ahead and convert the entire layer. Now the nice thing about that is if I did want to switch and I wanted to export a different part of the city, or if I wanted to zoom out, or if I wanted to add data later, I will have that lines layer in my file. So I only have to do this, this export one time, and then I can keep it in my file. I can use it again later. So again, it's only taking this long because of the polygon layer is such a large data set. The other layers will move much quicker. I'll let this finish up. When we hit OK, you'll notice that the layers turn colors. And I'm going to hit a cancel because it's already done. So you'll notice that I actually have two now. I've got a kind of a brown layer or an orange layer, and I've got this parcel polygon. So now I have parcel line and I have parcel polygon. In this case, I'm interested in the parcel line. I'm going to do the same thing we just did in order to generate that hatch file. Save as, browse, parcels lines, and it's a DXF, not a shapefile. And I'm going to come down here to, I do not want to add it to my map. I've already got it in my map. And I do want to set the extent. In this case, I want to set it to the map view extent. So I want to make sure that I'm not generating it for the entire county of Orange. I'm going to hit OK. If everything's done correctly, it will give me a little blue message. Okay. I'm going to check that file, 4.9 megabytes. Again, that's good. That's quite a bit smaller than the 91 megabytes that we got when we did the parcels with no extents. And I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that into my AutoCAD and hope it doesn't take too long to open. Okay. Now when I do my zoom extents this time, there it is. What you'll notice is that it adds some of these longer lines. Anything that is, any line that touches the map extent, if that particular line goes past the map extent, it will grab that whole line because it's a connected line. So even though I set my map extent to something like this, even though my map extent may have been much smaller, something like this, it will actually grab everything beyond that. So something like that. Anyway, but that's okay. Better to have a little too much than not enough. So now I can actually just double check it, and you'll notice that each parcel is its own closed polyline. You can double check that. It doesn't say closed, but if we needed to, if we did have a problem with it, we could always close it. It should be closed, even if it doesn't say it is. And now what we can do is we can start creating our base map layer in AutoCAD. So what I'm going to do is actually save this. So when I save it, it's going to ask me to save it as a DWG. And when you save it as a DWG, what you'll notice is that it's actually quite a bit smaller than a DXF, which is nice. It's only 1.6 megabytes instead of 4.9. So it keeps your file size nice and small, nice and nimble. And again, I can then now decide to go back and do this to a different layer. So it's a multi-step process, but if getting line work out of QGIS into AutoCAD is important for your project, which a lot of cases it is, then it's worth the effort to do this multi-step process in order to be able to do that. Again, once we do it one time, once we get it into AutoCAD, once it's a DXF, becomes a DWG, we no longer have to worry about QGIS and any quirks that it has. We can now move forward in AutoCAD from here. So that was it, quick tutorial, quick workaround, and I'll follow up with another tutorial that looks at the DXF export process, if there's a way to fix that bug and try and bypass to avoid this extra step. But in the meantime, if you need to get the information out, there is a way to do it. Thank you very much.